Offshore tax strategies for poker players. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can reduce the tax you pay on your poker winnings. Hey, I'm Andrew Henderson, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I have one of the greats of the poker industry. He is a top-earning poker player, very popular online, and he's the man that you may know as the having the monkey on his stack of chips. That's my favorite part. Jack Sinclair, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you. We're here in Tbilisi, Georgia, drinking the American Dream Ale. So,
yeah. It's nice of you to always branch out and try something new. The American flag on the beer.
This is good, but as we're going to talk about, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're a poker player, it's more of a nightmare because you've got a big tax problem on all of your winnings. You're from the UK where things are a little bit different. And kind of tell us how you got into poker and how you got started and how you stumbled on this whole tax nomad capitalist thing.
Yeah, I mean, I started playing poker about 6 or 7 years ago when I was at university in England, and I didn't have a clue about the tax situation, until quite a lot later. I mean, the situation for UK players is great. There's no tax whatsoever on poker winnings in the UK.
That was a Tony Blair thing, I think, or maybe Gordon Brown.
Yeah, a surprising choice for the government. You would have thought it would be Thatcher's government, but actually it was quite a lot later. But yeah, they decided they weren't going to tax gambling because if you're gambling, you're losing, so how can you tax it? But then, of course, there's a few of us that are lucky enough to be making money.
So the UK basically has a loophole where gambling is not taxed, and so most people are just going there making bets. Obviously, I mean, if you go to London, you go to Dublin, there's a lot of betting establishments that you wouldn't see in New York, for example. Just kind of betting on the corner, and people do that, and they lose.
Yeah.
But
for the most part.
For the most part. So they said, let's just forget it. We don't want tax. We don't want to be figuring out write-offs or figuring out wins and losses. Just don't tax it. And so you can live in London tax-free.
Yeah, as a UK resident, poker is tax-free. I still am registered as a tax resident in the UK as self-employed. I'm a self-employed sound engineer. I have no income and no expenses, but I still file a tax return each year just to, just to give them
big
something.
goose egg.
Yeah, I don't want to be registered as unemployed, basically.
Right. This is, I think, the interesting thing we were talking about before, kind of the three categories of folks who may play poker. You've got the UK or maybe a few other places where they don't tax gambling winnings, even though they have an income tax in general, and so you're home free. Then you've got everyone else, whether it's Canada, Australia, or wherever, where, okay, you're going to pay tax, but if you choose to relocate, redomicile, go through the whole non-residence process, you can choose your tax rate overseas, basically, and you've got to do that in a way that's poker friendly. And then you've got the U.S. citizens who are just screwed unless they give up their passport, which obviously we do happen to help people with. But for the U.S. people, it's really kind of the worst of all worlds. And I imagine you playing all around the world, you probably meet U.S. players. Does this come up?
Yeah, the U.S. players have a tendency to stay in America for the most part because they have to pay taxes regardless of where they go. And there seems to be a tendency with US citizens in general to like staying in the US.
Right.
So you don't see them abroad very often, especially not in Europe. There seems to be some sort of big fear of going to Europe.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, I suppose you could be a poker player and you could say, okay, this is my earned income, but then, you're still going to pay Social Security, Medicare tax. So, I mean, no matter how you structure your poker, even if you're really into it, as a U.S. citizen, you're barely going to save anything, and probably not at all. And you're saying when you're traveling around Europe, that's why there's no U.S. players.
Yeah, there's far less. I mean, there's a tendency among U.S. people in general to not want to travel so much outside of the States. And when you're paying tax on your worldwide income anyway, and the games are a lot tougher in Europe than they are in America, kind of for this reason, that it doesn't make so much sense for them to leave America without removing their residency.
You're saying playing poker in the U.S. is easier because nobody wants to go there and deal with the tax issue?
It's partially that. Yeah, there's less European players in there. They also don't have online poker in America. or there's very little of
I guess
it.
it's coming slowly, but
Yeah, coming back slowly. It used to be
coming back slowly. They ruined
Yeah.
it. They ruined a lot of people's lives, and now it's coming back.
Yeah, so they're slowly reintroducing online poker in the States, but without online poker, the average American player is a lot less skilled than the average European. So you tend to find the games are a lot softer in America, which is why even if you're paying your high rate of tax in America, you can still be making money. Whereas a lot of European players or a lot of people in Europe, it's a lot harder to make money if you're paying taxes as well.
So you're saying the people that you experience at a high level, you're playing in some of the higher stakes games now, the folks from Europe, have they all departed their country? And is that part of their strategy to keep more of these high level winnings?
It depends where they're from a lot. Some will move and get a new residency. The most popular places to do that is the UK, number one, then Vienna, and then Malta.
And so why those three? Because also you have to be an EU citizen, and ostensibly in the near future the UK may not work for that.
Yeah, the UK probably going to become more difficult to move to in the future. The UK is the best in terms of tax because you just don't pay tax, they don't ask questions, and that's that. Whereas Vienna and Malta are both in a similar situation where it's just kind of like a really grey area. Vienna, the tax, I think in theory you can pay zero as a poker player, but it's based on a grey area in the tax code that some lawyers have figured out in Vienna, and it seems like there was some rumors recently that it's changing, and everyone's getting a bit shaky about the Vienna situation, the Austria situation in terms of poker players paying tax, and especially capital gains tax, because of course a lot of guys are also in the crypto world where
They're putting it into crypto,
Right.
and then
so they're a bit worried about the capital gains tax situation in Austria as well. Malta, the situation's a little less grey, although it is still mostly based on ambiguity in the law, that you can create like a holding company in Cyprus and another shell company in Malta and pay something between 5 and 10% tax. But you have to file a tax return, you have to get an accountant, you have to have your winnings, your losses, and your expenses all like accounted for.
Malta's not a bad place. I mean, it's sleepy. I guess you spent some time in Malta. It's a bit sleepy.
Yeah, technically I live in Malta now, but I'm there on a tourist visa because I don't want to be a resident.
Right, as an EU citizen.
Yeah.
So there is a residence program where you can go and you can pay, a certain amount of tax, and you can just get into Malta. Whether you want to live in Malta or not is another interesting question. But I mean, as far as the complexity of Malta and Cyprus for corporate reporting, I mean that's getting up there in terms of it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, my roommate has been trying to figure out he's been in Malta for like a few years now, and he's still trying to figure out what his actual tax liability is, based on multiple lawyers and accountants that are telling him different stuff, and he has companies and this and that, and it's all very hard to untangle.
And that's the challenge, obviously, in any part of this offshore tax stuff is people go to their local accountant, their local attorney, and they get all these conflicting opinions. They're told, don't be too aggressive, even though the strategy that they're asking about isn't aggressive, it's perfectly legal, but the guy they're asking doesn't really know about it, so he just says, don't do it. That's really the challenge. And I think that's where the EU is potentially problematic. I think that the UK is an interesting place to be because it's right there.
Yeah.
Even though there's that exemption of if you're a professional player, maybe you should be paying, what is that? What's professional? Nobody's doing that.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, professional poker players, it's nothing.
You're just a gambler.
Yeah, you could be unemployed if you want. I mean, I could technically be unemployed in the UK, and collect benefits if I wanted to, which is obviously pretty funny. That the UK government would pay me to be a
play
poker player.
poker.
Yeah. But I'm not taking that, obviously. It's in the EU. The other problem with Malta is that you don't have a tax treaty with the US. So if you win any significant amount of money in the States, they will withhold 30%, and then good luck trying to get that back.
Right. And whereas in the UK, it's very...
The UK has a tax treaty with the US, so you show them your UK passport, or UK residency, or UK ITIN, the tax number, and they just stamp it, and you get all of your winnings.
You're on your way. And then you go to the UK and tell them...
and you don't tell them anything.
Right.
I recently deposited some cash into my bank in the UK, just a big stack of cash from gambling. And they said, "Oh, where's this from?" I said, "Gambling." I said, "Oh, that's nice," and cashed it.
Yeah, good luck doing that in the U.S.
Yeah.
You'd be like in the back room being beaten up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get away with it in the U.S.
But you're Jack Sinclair.
But it's because I have the UK passport.
So, I mean, I'm wondering, if someone's playing at a high level and they're a U.S. citizen, I mean, I imagine there has to be somebody who could just afford to say, you know what, I'm going to pay $100,000, I'm going to get one of those Caribbean passports, maybe then I'll go and set up some kind of residence in the UK, and I'm just going to leave the U.S. I mean, I think someone could probably turn that into a pretty good ROI.
Yeah, I think I would like to talk to some of I know some very high-level American players, who are playing super high rollers, like the highest stakes available all around the world, and for sure they must, if they're paying taxes in the US, they're probably really shooting themselves in the foot with that. I don't know if going the Caribbean route is so great because a lot of them will be no tax treaty with the US.
So if you play in the U.S.,
yeah.
But if you have that, so this is what I'm saying. You want a belt and suspenders possibly, where you're going to stack a treaty residence, and you can be a resident in one of those countries and then use that.
Yeah.
Right. So,
but then you would just need your passport from somewhere.
Right. So
you
need a passport to get out, but then you're not going to live in that country.
Yeah.
And then you want the treaty country to stack, so you're going to do 2 in 1.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Could be good.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
I think for US players, though, the best thing would be to start with the residency, become non-resident in the US, because you still have to pay tax, but it's much less, right? If you're not actually living in.
I think it's no. I mean, I think there's.
Doesn't matter.
You're in or you're out.
Okay.
You're in or you're out. This is why the American dream. It's not all it's cracked up to be if you're playing poker. And you mentioned a great point, which is a lot of these guys are now putting their winnings into cryptocurrency. And then they have these capital gains issues. Again, in the US, there's no escaping capital gains, whether you live there or not. I mean, I've had guys come to me, they said, I'm making $5 million a year trading stocks. Well, get a new passport.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, at what point is it worth, in your opinion, moving? You're lucky. People from the UK are lucky. But if you're not, I mean, when do you think it's worth moving?
Well, I mean, I guess it obviously depends on the cost of it for a start. How much you're making per year, versus the cost and how many years you plan to do it. Because there's no point like renouncing your citizenship, moving away, then playing for a few years and trying to move back. A lot of people, a lot of Americans will want to get out of the game at some point and move back to America. So you've got to weigh that in your calculation, and also just the actual amount that you can make.
Well, I want to come back to that in a minute. I do think that, and we'll make a video on this, but I do think that if you got out of the U.S. for a while, you'll start seeing, oh, this is kind of like New York. Oh, this is kind of like L.A. Oh, this is like my favorite beach. Oh, this is like, well, there's nothing like Kansas, maybe. I don't know what's like, well, somewhere in maybe England. Maybe somewhere in England or something. I don't know.
Right.
But I think you'll start to see, oh, maybe that's the push to be, oh, okay, now I'm out of the U.S. Now I'm seeing other places. Yeah, I could live here. Maybe I don't have to go back. It's like dipping the toe in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the question though, as to when you should leave, is, if I talk to a guy who's running a business, it's like I'm making $1 million a year in my business, and it's consistent, and I'm growing it. I'm running more Facebook ads, whatever the case may be. I mean, it's going to be 1.2 next year, 1.6 after that. That's predictable.
Yeah.
Obviously, poker not as predictable.
Poker is very unpredictable, and kind of one of the real problems with this is like, if you're paying your income tax in America, 1 year you could be up over $1 million. Another year you might be losing money. So I'm not entirely sure how the taxation works in the US, whether you can, count your losses next year against the tax you paid the year before, and if you get away with that. But the disparity in how much you make from year to year can be very high.
And it's not really very friendly in that
No.
you don't, right. So is it worth moving? I'm still trying to figure out, like, let's say you're going to play for the next 5 years. I mean, how do you make sure it's worth doing? So, because it seems like if I can save $1 million, I want to do that.
Yeah, I think that you have to get the calculator out. It'd be working in the Excel thing. How much do you genuinely think you're going to make outside the US? And you've got to also account for the fact that you'll make a lower ROI outside the US than inside. as a live poker player, that is. If you're playing live poker, your ROI is higher in the US. Like that's guaranteed, unless you spend your entire time playing in Asia, like Macau or somewhere. But if you're playing tournaments, which is what I play, then your highest ROI is in the United States.
We're going to miss you in Macau this month, by the way. I was hoping you'd get me into one of those poker. You'd teach me how. You'd show me how to start.
Are you going there?
We're going to be in Macau. So now I know it. Now I know this is the beginning of my big burgeoning poker career.
Oh right. Yeah, well, it's a good place to start for sure.
Excellent. So in closing, I think that the question I would ask to piggyback off everything you said is, let's say I'm that U.S. player and I've got this terrible tax situation. I'm almost wondering if there's some kind of built-in incentive for me to jump into the pond, get out of the U.S., and then work on doing whatever it takes. I don't know what that is, to up my game. To say, all right, now I'm going to get to that higher level so I can be not only dominant in the U.S. but dominant everywhere. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think in terms of skill level, a lot of Americans would improve a lot by leaving America and like moving to Europe.
You're going to offend a lot of people by saying that.
Yeah, but
comment below. I want to know your comments. Leave a comment below.
Yeah, as much as they don't like to admit it, I think everyone knows that the American standard is just it's lower. I mean. Right. It's a fact. Right. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, for American players, one thing I don't recommend, which is what a lot of players do, is to move to Canada. There's a lot of United States players who play online that when online poker became illegal in the States, they fled to Canada because it's kind of like the United States is close, same time zone, all these things, but you're still paying huge taxes. Whereas they could just go to Mexico, Costa Rica, somewhere below the border and pay much less taxes.
I think that's the important thing to understand is you have the three categories of folks. You have the U.S. folks who are totally screwed and you've got to make a decision. Are you willing to do what it takes to really get rid of these extreme tax rates? You got the U.K. folks on the other end who it's fantastic. And then in the middle is everyone else who, is there a Costa Rica? Is there a Macau? Is there a Hong Kong? Is there one of these territorial or low tax jurisdictions where you can go and live? And I want to ask you one other question on that actually, but is there a place where you can go and you can say, now I'm living here, we're going to fix the situation back where you're from, we're going to get you set up over here? And to me, that's like the easiest thing to do. So if you're not UK and you're not US, then it's a relatively straightforward procedure. Honestly, I wouldn't be doing it in the EU because there's just so many rules and regulations and moving parts. The last thing that you've told me, and part of why we're here in Tbilisi, Georgia, which is a relatively tax-friendly place, is you can legally play poker here. They have poker, all over the place here. And so you've said, like, when you travel, there's some places where you go where it's like, I can't play. That has to factor into this too.
For sure. Like, if you are an online player, and you want to, or even if you're a live player who sometimes plays online, such as myself, you don't want to be stuck somewhere where you can't play online. So obviously, if it is one of those places, it has to have good casinos as well, with big games running. I mean, I think Georgia's actually a pretty good option in general. I mean, if you set up a company here, you pay 10% income tax, and I think it's 10% capital gains as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so from 0 to 20, depending on how you do it, and we could structure it to be closer to 0, hopefully. So
I think this is a reasonable choice for European citizens. The only problem here is the time zone,
and a lot less kind of paperwork and madness.
Yeah, for sure. The problem with Malta and Vienna, or I should say Austria, but Austria is just Vienna for poker players.
Sorry, Austrians.
And Veldon, actually. We sometimes play live in Veldon. But yeah, the problem with those places is that you have to be making a lot of appointments with lawyers and accountants.
And that's not cheap.
Not cheap. Or you never know when they might turn around and say, you know what, actually, this is illegal.
Correct.
Give us money.
No, this is, my experience in Europe, and with everything that we do, nobody loves Europeans more than I do. But there just seems to be something different in continental Europe about how, versus the Anglo world, the UK, the US, Canada, all these places, or even in Hong Kong, there seems to be something different where it's you're never getting the entire story. It's always kind of changing. Then you get then there's a problem, and then they're like, oh, well, we knew it could have been, it's never a straight scoop. And I think that just getting out of that environment, the Costa Ricas, the Georgias, there's so many places, Thailand's.
Yeah.
Also just a lot easier. I understand if you're an EU citizen, you can move around, but it's not that difficult to get Thailand residence.
I know nothing about Asia, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, yeah. So the bottom line is, playing online is something you have to think about. Are there any particular places where you'd say, don't bother?
Wow, Portugal is one that comes to mind as a place that people think of as a good place to get residency.
Potentially tax friendly, yeah.
Yeah, you can't play online there at all. And as far as I know, there's no big casino action going on in Portugal, so I'd definitely not suggest that. Also, if you're going, like, I know the Lisbon airport doesn't have very good flights going anywhere. I have a friend who lives in Lisbon. He says the airport's really bad. So I would advise strongly against that.
Yep.
I mean, the other places where online is illegal is or heavily restricted is Italy and Spain, although those are not tax-friendly places to begin with.
No.
Same with France, actually, which is obviously...
There may be a few havens in the EU, but I really think, I mean, just my opinion, if you want simplicity, if you want ease, if you just want things to be handled properly, is probably just to get out of the EU. And if you want to go there and play every once in a while, so be it. But get out. And so there may be a combination of a residence, it may be a citizenship, it's probably some tax planning where you're from. There's a lot of different moving parts. So if this is something that you're trying to figure out, leave a comment below, and we can help you do that. Jack, great to have you, and always good to see you in Tbilisi, and good luck with the games.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
All right. I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you're looking for a way to legally reduce your taxes, build your freedom, and create wealth faster as a global citizen, then you've come to the right place. I want you to do 3 things right now. Number 1, click the button to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to get notifications so you never miss a new video. Number 2, get a copy of our #1 best-selling book, Nomad Capitalist, on Amazon, and learn all of the dozens of benefits of our lifestyle. And number 3, if you're already a 6 or 7-figure entrepreneur and you want to put these strategies in place, go to nomadcapitalist.com and find out how to get some help.